Well, good morning. Welcome. My name is Mark Lucenius. I'm lead pastor here, and I'll add my welcome to the one you've already received. And I'm just going to take us right into our message today. We're going to read from Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 9. For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of His will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please Him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to His glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of His holy people in the kingdom of light. Well, we're in a series on this letter to the Colossians. The Apostle Paul wrote this letter to a people he did not know. He had heard about the Colossians, and he had heard about their new faith. He'd heard about how God had worked in his life, in their lives, and he wanted to just send them a letter telling them a few of the things that he has learned along the way. And this letter ended up being passed around from church to community, and is a part of the scriptures for us to this day. And this is a prayer he prays for the Colossians in this particular passage. And I'll get to it in a little bit, but first I have a sports confession to make. It's a good day for sports. The Eagles are playing this afternoon. I'm quite hopeful for the Eagles. But it was a big week for us. I grew up as a Penn State fan. My friend across the street, his father played for Penn State, and so from an early age, I was taught to cheer for the Nittany Lions. I remember where I was in 1986 when Vinny Testaverde threw an interception at the 10-yard line right before they were going to win the game, which they did it because, we intercepted the ball, and therefore Penn State beat the Miami Hurricanes and won the national championship. I remember where I was there, and ever since then I've been a Penn State fan, and I've watched Penn State. Some years closer to others, but I don't think a week has gone by where I didn't at least know the outcome of the Penn State game. And so, as you can imagine, I was watching very closely this Thursday night, as it was a very, very close game before our hearts got broken in the last minute. If you didn't know, Penn State lost. But here's my confession: I knew it was going to happen the whole time. I knew it was going to happen the whole time. They were just going to wreck our hearts. I mean, we were winning in the fourth quarter. I'm like, I didn't believe it. I didn't have any hope. I knew that they were going to break our hearts because I had this one phrase that just kept going through my head: good things don't happen to us. It's not going to happen for us. A good thing is not going to happen to Penn State because they always come up against a team that might be slightly better than them, and it always happens like this. And I realized in that moment, I had a mindset. I had a mindset about Penn State that I'm going to go for the ride and hope I might have my mind changed about it, but I make no mistake, they will disappoint me. It was a mindset. Now, a lot of Eagles fans used to have that mindset as well, but that mindset got changed. Mindsets can change. But my question for you is, do you have any mindsets regarding life? A mindset, and particularly a fixed mindset, is often sort of a decision that you might have made in your life or about your past or about how your life is going to go that shapes the way you experience it. A book was published in 2006 that kind of famously talked about this. A woman named Carol Dweck talked about mindsets, in particular fixed mindsets. And maybe you have a mindset about the Eagles, maybe you have a mindset about Penn State, and that's fine. It doesn't matter if I have a mindset about Penn State, right? I didn't affect the outcome, but if the quarterback had a mindset, that would really affect the outcome. But a mindset could sound like this: I'm just not good at math, and therefore I won't try. Or I'm just not good at technology. And so anytime there's any sort of technology struggle, you're like, oh, it's like I'm not good. I'm not going to figure this thing out, right? Or maybe you might think it's like, well, if I had enough talent, I'd be more successful, which leads you to never actually try. Or the fact that I failed once at this, maybe I should never try again. Maybe I should just accept any spouse I can get. Or there are leaders in this world, and I am not one of them. Or maybe you have a mindset that says, hey, I'm not very smart, and therefore any effort to change that you won't actually attempt because you've decided that you're a certain level of intelligence. A more spiritual mindsets could sound like this: God will never forgive me for what I've done. Is that God or is that you? God owes me a good life because of all that I've done. What's wrong with world? What's wrong with life if I'm suffering? Just a common American mindset is that if I'm suffering, something is wrong. If things aren't going the way I want them to be, then there must be something deeply wrong. And maybe it's with me, but it's probably with others, right? Well, in the passage we read and in the next few weeks, the Apostle Paul is going to put sticks of dynamite underneath all of our fixed mindsets, and he's going to light a fuse, and he's going to blow them away because a faith in God actually breaks all of these things down. The passage we read, and I didn't introduce it, I didn't set it up as I often do, but you probably were like, nah, whatever. But Paul has a prayer and an expectation for what God can do in your life that's way bigger and bolder than you probably will allow yourself to believe or hope. And I want us to just try and see if we can allow maybe that which we might think is fixed in our lives to bend a little bit. This is how Paul prays for you and how he invites you to pray for yourself and for one another. And I want you to think about his expectations for your life and compare them to your expectations for your life. All right, his prayer is that a few things would happen so that you might live a life worthy of the Lord, that your life would be worthy of Jesus, that your life could please him, that your life could bear fruit, that your life could be marked by growth, by strength, that your life could be marked by power, real power. People would feel the power of your life. Your life could be marked by endurance, by patience. Your life could be marked by joy, by thankfulness. He talks about sharing an inheritance. Your life could be marked by rich relationships of people who consider themselves abundantly wealthy. And these were very, very poor people. That you could share an inheritance, that all of the wealth of God's you consider your own. And that your life could be marked by light. All of these things Paul expects can and should be true of you, and he expects you to expect them for your life as well. Now, I'm not talking like Pollyanna, like everything is like super easy and super great all the time. I want to read you another one of Paul's letters where he describes what his life is like, all right? He said, there are some people who are like, don't listen to Paul, he's just whatever. And he is just an apostle, just sucking up all the benefits of some spiritual authority. He says, let me tell you what my spiritual authority has gotten me in life. And this is how he describes his life. He says, I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, and been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 40 lashes. You're not allowed to whip somebody 40 times because they technically consider you. That's actually what you would do to kill someone. So the Jews, what they would do is they would just lash them 40 times and then take one off, make it 39 times. If that was me, I'd be just like, can you just do one more? Anyway, 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I'm never getting on a boat with that guy. I spent a night and day in the open sea. I've been constantly on the move. I've been in danger from rivers, in dangers from bandits, in dangers from fellow Jews, in dangers from Gentiles, in dangers in the city, in dangers in the country, in dangers at sea, and in danger from false believers. I've labored and toiled and often gone without sleep. I've known hunger and thirst and have gone without food. I've been cold and naked. Besides everything else, I face the daily pressure of my concern for all the churches. Paul's lived a really challenging and difficult life. And yet, in the midst of those difficulties, he also has experienced for himself all those things: joy, peace, endurance, patience, gratitude, an abundant, dynamic, wonderful life that's marked with all kinds of difficulties and challenges. And the mindset that oftentimes a consumer world gives to us is that, like, look, if you're suffering, something's wrong. Paul would be like, absolutely not. This life is jacked up, it's hard, it's broken, and you can experience all sorts of difficulties in life and be marked by your joy, be marked by your gratitude, abundance, patience. All these things can and should be true of you. And he says, what is your expectation? Are you just trying to get through and hopefully see if you can get 5 days of vacation at some point? Or could every day and moment matter? Paul puts dynamite under the low expectations that the Western world lays on people. Just work hard. If we get every single person in America to continue to work 50 hours a week, we'll continue to have a rising Dow Jones, and we'll give you 4 days off and a cell phone. We don't realize as Westerners how low our expectations of life are. If we just keep working a little bit harder, maybe we can just squeeze out something. No, Paul says every single moment of your life could be marked by gratitude, joy, peace, patience, endurance, that we can live dynamic, victorious lives. And yes, we're going to get knocked around. Yes, we are going to get knocked down, but we're the kind of people that get up and finish and do it with joy and gratitude. We don't live with limitations like, I'm not very smart, I can't do this, I can't do that. No. We break through all of those things and live lives of faith and abundance. And what Paul says in this, and he makes it really, really simple. He says he prays for them that something very, very specific would happen that would lead them into this very dynamic, abundant, wonderful life. And it's a very, very simple, clear path. And I want to teach through that specific path. He says in verse 9, he says, for this reason, since we've heard about you, we've been praying for you, and this is what we're asking. And this is the simple path. He says, look, we ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives. See, if you know the will of God and you get it, it's a really, really good deal. It may be hard, but it can be wonderful. The Lord's prayers, your will be done. If God's will is done in your life, this is what will open up to you all the abundance, all the dynamics, yes, the sufferings, yes, the difficulties, yes, the challenges, but the endurance, the hope, the joy, the gratitude, the wonders, the curiosities, all these things open up through the very simple path of just understanding what God's will for us is. We don't need to know everything. If we can know what he has for us, man, we could live wonderful lives in that. And so he says three specific things. The first one I want us to just think about is that if you're going to know the Lord's will, you're going to need understanding. You're going to need to know about your faith. And my hope in this little point is to help you know that you can learn a lot about your faith fast. I think one of the mindsets that people have is that there are people who know the Bible, and there's people who know all the Christian things, and then there's me. I don't really know much, but I'll show up and I'll help out here or there. Actually, I would suggest to you that you can know just about 80% of all that you really need to know about the Christian faith actually really quite fast. In about an hour, you could sit down and read one of the Gospels. You could read the Gospel of Matthew or the Gospel of Mark. Mark's the shortest one. You could read the Gospel of Luke or the Gospel of John. You could read one of those in about an hour and actually increase by multiple percentage points that which you know about the Christian faith. You're going to have a whole bunch of questions. You're going to have way more questions, right? But you can know a lot. You could probably sit down and read the book of Romans. If you read the book of Romans, it may take you about 30 minutes, and it'll kind of bend your brain a little bit, right? But you're going to increase your knowledge. You could do it actually really quickly. You could read the New Testament one chapter a day in well under a year. There's 260 chapters in the New Testament. If you read one chapter a year, one chapter a week, if you read one chapter a minute, no. If you read one chapter a day in 260 days, let's just say you missed some days, you can get through that in a year. And in the course of that year, you will know so much more about your faith. And wouldn't that be one of the most helpful things that could ever happen in your life? A guy named Michael Frost, an Australian guy, ended up running into a group of surfers. And he ended up hanging around with these surfers, and he asked them, you guys have this very unique culture. What's the distinctives about this culture? And they talked about different things, like the products they liked, the things they liked to eat, the kind of clothes they like to wear. And they said, who are your heroes? Who are the heroes in your surfing culture? And they all said the same person. His name is Rabbit Bartholomew. I'm not a surfer remotely, but they all had this guy, Rabbit Bartholomew, and he's like, well, tell me about him. And they knew all sorts of information about him, where he was born, where he grew up, the surfboards he liked, when he got sponsored, his first major win, how many wins he had, how long his career was, when he retired, why he chose to retire, who his wife's name was, how many kids they had, some of the other surfers he had influenced. In their surfing culture, they just knew Rabbit Bartholomew, and Rabbit Bartholomew had influenced them significantly. And Michael Frost is like, well, what if Christians learned Jesus like surfers learned Rabbit Bartholomew? There's actually a lot of things. There's a lot of things we're never going to know about Jesus, but there's a lot of things you can know. What if in this year you just decide, hey, look, I'm going to learn about Jesus. I'm going to read each of the biographies on his life, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. I'm going to watch The Chosen. I'm going to read a few things about him. You can learn an awful lot about him. And that wouldn't be such a crazy endeavor. My guess is in your field, there's some heroes in your field. If you're in the tech industry, my suspicion is somewhere along the way, you read the biography of Steve Jobs way longer than the Gospels. All right? I like to study leadership. I've read the biographies of multiple presidents. I like to read about the Revolutionary War. I'm into basketball, so I'll watch videos about the Dream Team or the Redeem Team or Michael Jordan. I learn the heroes of those specific worlds. Why? Because I'm interested in those things. How much more interesting and how much more powerful would it be for you to learn about the person who created you? And the person who invites you to live like he does, and who promises that if you learn his way of living, what would come with it would be great endurance, gratitude, joy, peace. This very, very dynamic, wonderful, in many ways explosive life could be yours. Your life could be marked by strength and peace if you would learn his life. What would it be like for you to learn Jesus? You can do that. I know learning the dynamics of Harry and Meghan and the royals could also be very interesting as well, but will they actually give you more patience in life? Learning Jesus will change your life. And you can grow with that. Jesus is God with a face. To learn his life is to learn God. To know God is to have an understanding that opens up an entirely different way of living. And this can make you immediately fruitful. This can make you immediately fruitful. There was a woman who lived just kind of outside of the Jewish world. She was She was a Samaritan, a Gentile, not particularly appreciated by the Jews, and she met Jesus and in one encounter went back to the village and transformed the entire village by saying, hey, look, this is my experience of Jesus. This is really, really helpful for parents because a lot of parents say, like, I really like my kids to know the faith, but I don't really know the faith. And like, you don't even have to be one step ahead of your kids. You could be a half step behind them, right? Like, what did you learn? What did you learn, when you were in children's ministry today? Like, okay. You can write that down and learn from them, right? You don't have to be the one who has all the answers. Trust me, your kids aren't going to follow you in your faith because you have all the answers and information, right? They follow your character. So just be humble and be a learner. And you know what might happen in their lives? They might be humble, become learners as well. If you are fascinated with learning who Jesus was, I would suspect that your kids would also become fascinated with learning who Jesus is. One of the things we're getting started in the next couple of weeks is something called Alpha, which is an introduction to the Christian faith. And for a lot of us, we might feel like we have like a lot of eclectic answers, but we don't really know the foundation of the basics, like the foundation of where it starts. Alpha is a great thing for you if that's what you're interested in, or if the faith is new to you, or if you're returning to the faith, or if you're like, I've been around it a bunch, but I'd really like to know how it it's like the basis. Alpha is a great course for that. And we want that to be part of our culture because we want to be the kind of people who learn Jesus. So understanding is really, really helpful. If I gave you the option, though, you're going to have surgery and you're going to get a guy coming right out of med school who's got all the answers, or a guy who went to med school and then did it for 20 years, who would you choose? Well, you'd choose the guy, you'd like the guy who has the answers, but you'd like the guy who's been practicing the answers for 20 years even better, right? Why? Because he has wisdom, right? And so when Paul prays for the Colossians, he says, I pray that you might have understanding, and I pray that you might have wisdom. Wisdom is practice using the answers, all right? And so life is filled with competing values. Wisdom figures out what to do with those values, right? We're always answering the questions where we're either deciding between two good outcomes or deciding between two bad outcomes. Should I go visit my extended family? I'll let you decide which one of those that might be. Should I spend more time with my extended family? Should I spend more time with my nuclear family? Should I spend more time with my girlfriend? Should I introduce her to my family? Should I if you are a teenager, you might have a friend who's making a bad choice, and you know enough to know that they're making a bad choice, but you need wisdom to know what to do about them making a bad choice. Should I just ditch them and abandon them in their bad choice? Should I stick with them so I can help them clean up after their bad choice? Should I raise my hand and out them about their bad choice? Should I talk to my parents and trust them to interact with them about their bad choice? I kind of vote for that one. But if you're a kid, you're in these situations where you might have understanding, but how to apply that understanding is an entirely different idea. And there's all sorts of platitudes out there. Like, I've got my priorities in life: God, family, career, right? Well, sure, sounds great, but how does that help you at 5:30 at night when you need to or 7:30 at night when you need to choose who you're going to disappoint? Are you going to disappoint your boss? Are you going to disappoint your kids? You're going to disappoint your spouse? You're going to disappoint your friend who you're going to be meeting with, right? Understanding those things, well, it requires wisdom. When we planted 938 Church, I had been a pastor at that point in growing churches, for 15 years and been in ministry for much longer. I actually had a lot of wisdom, particularly when it comes to running the ministries of a church. But I had never started a church. I had never built out the back office of a church. I had never filed for a 501c3. And so what we did was we partnered with an organization called Stadia Church Planting, who did all of those things, and who are part of planting churches all throughout the country. Why? Because they had wisdom. And wisdom wasn't known because they had all the answers, right? It's tempting to think of wisdom, and if you want to grow in wisdom by having all the answers. They didn't. It's not that they had all the answers. They had the right questions. They had questions I didn't know were questions. It's not that I didn't have the answers. I didn't even have the right questions. When you're around a wise person, they might have all the answers, but you'll know their wisdom not by necessarily their answers, but by the questions that they have. Like, there are questions in your life that you should be asking that you don't even know about. Yeah, we might think we have all the answers, but the wise person recognizes that we might not even have the right questions. The scriptures are really unique in this way. For like a holy book, you sort of expect it would give you all the answers. It gives you a lot of stories that talks about how God has been at work in people's lives throughout history and how people have rejected him, how people have resisted him, and then also how people have trusted him. But at the center of the scriptures are 5 books known as the wisdom books, the wisdom literature. In particular, you have the Psalms. The Psalms talk about, they give us an emotional experience of God. Most of us have all the right intellectual answers about who God is, but it's our emotions about life that jack us up and continue to blow up our situations, right? We might have all the right understanding, but it's our emotional experience of life and God that could lead us down other paths. The scriptures give us 150 Psalms that cover all the range of our emotional life in order to worship him, to respond to him, and to even understand our own very weird hearts at times. It has the book of Proverbs, which is just a set of sayings that can continue to bring light into the gray things in life. In kindergarten, we figured out how to handle all the black and white situations, right? I should not lie. I should tell the truth. I shouldn't punch my friend, right? But ever since kindergarten, life becomes really, really gray. You can't just solve all the situations in life by making sure everybody watches the right news information, right? Like, life isn't about making sure that everybody's following the right news ecosystem. There's so many gray things in life, and there's things we need to sort out in our lives. The Proverbs continue to speak wisdom to that. God not only gives us the scriptures to grow in our knowledge and our wisdom, but he also gives us one another. He places us in a church. The power of working with Stadia Church Planting wasn't just that they had a lot of answers and they had a lot of right questions. I could have gotten that through a book. I could have just read a book. But what they gave me was people, a community of other church planters. I worked with a group of other guys who were planting at the same time, and I had a mentor who had already planted a couple churches. And then after we launched, I was with a group of other folks who were in their first couple years. And Rachel was linked to other folks who were connected to church planting, and we had peers who were doing it with us, but also mentors who could help guide us forward. Do you have mentors who can give you wisdom about your life? If you've reached the top of your profession, you got to find somebody who is ahead of you in some way to help you understand how to move forward, right? Do you have the wisdom to move forward in your profession? Do you have the wisdom to move forward as a parent? Who could help you ask the right questions? See, when God saves us, he doesn't save us into like this new, unique situation where we get to perform really well. He saves us into a family. And when you have a family, you've got brothers and sisters, you got aunts and uncles, you got people who are older than you that can help you ask the right questions. You have people who are younger than you who could also help you ask the right questions, right? Because you've been in the faith way too long. You're like, oh, it's all gray. No, people are younger be like, why are you so boring about your faith? God is real. Like, why can't you trust him? People that younger than you are very helpful for your faith. Do you have people younger than you reminding you of how great God is? You're saved into a family. Next Sunday, if you don't have a group, a community of folks that you're interacting with your faith in, I totally want you to be part of a group, and that's why we do Group Connect 2-3 times a year, to help people get started, to have people in their lives who they can get wisdom from, they can learn, they can see the faith through somebody else's eyes. I continue to do that with a group of pastors I meet with every single month. We need that wisdom, both directions. Those older than us, those younger than us, helping us ask better questions. We can have all the understanding and we can have all the wisdom, but we can still miss it. Have you ever met that person who knows so much about the faith and gets so much of their life right, and yet they're still miserable? And you don't actually want to be around them? That can happen to any of us. Paul puts one very specific descriptor when he says, hey, I'm praying that you'll know the Lord's will through all wisdom and understanding. And that descriptor is the third point. Wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives. We need a spiritual wisdom. There's a story about Jesus in his life, and while he was teaching and his ministry was blowing up and people were seeing the signs and seeing how people's lives were being changed by him, and a gentleman came to him by the name of Nicodemus. Nicodemus was one of the most significant teachers in Israel at the time. He knows way more. He would have known way more than any of us. He had forgotten more than any of us probably knows. He was literally one of the lead teachers in all of Israel. But he came to Jesus at night because he was afraid he was going to find out. He comes to Jesus at night and he's like, "You're blowing my mind, bro." And he's like, "This is amazing." But it was really clear that he didn't get it. And so Jesus has one very specific response to him. Listen to what he says to Nicodemus. He says, "Very truly I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again." And I know some folks, when they think of like 70s right-wing politics. That's not what Jesus is talking about here. What Jesus is talking about is that you need the Holy Spirit inside of you. If you're going to see life in light of what the Spirit of God has done, you actually need that very Holy Spirit. When you experience something, it's one thing, but who you experience with it is very, very unique. All right, so if you might remember, if you've seen Silver Linings Playbook, they're Eagles fans. They're like serious Eagles fans. They're like real Eagles fans. If you want to understand Eagles fans, you watch Silver Linings Playbook. But when you come to the dad's house, he's like, "Here's how it is at the Eagles game. You sit there and you sit there. I wear this jersey. We have this food, and the food goes right here. And if we don't do it like that, the whole thing's going to fall apart, right?" And when it comes to football fans, if you've been invited into watching a football game with another person, with a football fan, you've been invited into something close to a sanctuary, right? Because their experience of the game is very particular. And if you come in and you're like all chatty, like about the commercials or like the uniforms, you're going to ruin their experience and you're never going to be invited back again, right? When you get invited into a football fan to watch the game with them, they curate that experience. Why? Because it matters who they see the game with, right? Maybe you've been on a vacation and you got to see an amazing thing, but one of the reasons why it was amazing, it was because of the person you were with. Kathleen and I have amazing memories of our trips to New England. I don't remember much about New England, but it was amazing because we were together. It was the two of us together. Being with her made that thing amazing. And if you are going to experience life as God intends you to experience life, He wants you to experience it with Him. And Nicodemus wasn't getting Jesus. And all of his efforts to fulfill the law and obey God as hard as he couldn't figure it out. It wasn't working for him. Why? Because, well, he didn't have God with him. The very intention that God has for your life is that you would experience life with him. Otherwise, well, it just doesn't work. There's an aphorism that's been around a long time that when it comes to the faith, the first generation who experiences the faith, it becomes a faith. The next generation of people who have experienced the faith, and they have parents that experience the faith, well, that's a tradition. The third generation, well, then it becomes a relic. In the fourth generation, well, that relic, well, like any other relic in the fourth generation, it's just trash. The Christian faith is a first-generation faith. You have to experience it for yourself. If it's just simply a tradition, it's only a tradition. And if you hand to your children a tradition, all it will be to them is a relic. And if you hand your children's children a relic, those children's children, they'll consider it trash, and they will dispense of it. The Christian faith is always first generation. And maybe you have parents who have a very dynamic faith. It needs to become yours. Until it becomes yours, it's not your faith. Just because they've experienced God in their lives, that's great. But then for you, it's only a tradition. You need to experience it for yourself. And that's why Jesus said to Nicodemus, if you're going to figure it out, if you're going to get it, you must be born again. A few years ago, I had a great experience of going to the Brandywine Art Museum, and we were doing an event there, and we had a woman who knew the Wyeth family. If you don't know, most of the Brandywine Art Museum is the art of N.C. Andrew and Jamie Wyeth. Well, she knew the family, and she just took us through all the artwork, and she was describing it, and I'm sort of a guy who, I would go to art appreciation, and if they'd ask me, would you like to see some art? I'd say, well, I'd appreciate that. And so that's about all I know about art, right? But I appreciate art when I see it, and I'm like, that's really, really cool. But when she was telling the stories, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And it's an amazing museum. You should go see it. It's a great thing to do in the winter, right? And she was able to experience it. But what would it have been like for Jamie Wyeth to come and tell me about the art? Then I would have the artist himself telling me exactly what he did, why he did it, and why it mattered, why he did this and not this. And if I had the artist telling me about the art, I would understand the art for what it truly intended. God intends to be in your life because you are his art. You are his art. This world is his art, and his intention for you is to be with you, to be in you by his Spirit, so that you might know the Lord's will, to know why, to understand that he is with you through the challenges, so that you might experience your purpose, why he created you the way he did, why he didn't include this, why he included this, why was this a part of your story, why is this a part of your journey, why this is part of your moment. And he isn't necessarily going to give you all the answers right away, but he might give you the right questions by being with you. It's the heart of why we must be born again, why our experience of life can be filled with great endurance, hope, gratitude, and joy if we allow the Spirit's presence in our lives to be active. And when we know his presence in our lives, our expectations of life can go way, way higher. And I'm not talking money. I'm not even talking about health. I'm not even talking about all the sort of outcomes that we might have set resolutions for. I'm talking about the things we really, really long for: endurance, strength, power, gratitude, joy. All those are true for us. All those can be true for us by allowing the Spirit to be present in our lives, and to go on the journey with God's Spirit for real understanding about who he is, learning Jesus for who he is, God with a face. and getting the wisdom that he would give to us, all of these things could activate. So if you've been sort of an observer to the faith, maybe standing outside the faith, and it's not adding up for you, but you know it, you don't learn the faith like a food critic, just assessing it from the outside, comparing it to every other. At some point in time, you need to try it on. And I'd invite you, I'm going to pray in a moment, invite you to ask God to birth his Spirit in your life so that you might experience from the inside. Maybe that's happened before in your life, but you've got so many mindsets going on that you've just reduced your expectations of life to something very, very low and weak. I want to invite you to ask God to reactivate and fill you with his Spirit again. A simple verse that Jesus taught. He said, if you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him? So I want to give you a few moments, just a minute or more, to be quiet. And I just want us to sit with God for a moment in some quiet. Maybe you'll ask him, like, God, is there a mindset that I've been believing that's not true? But don't get stuck there too long. I'd encourage you to just ask him for your Spirit. Give me your Spirit. I want to know you. I want to know your power at work in my life. I want your presence in me. Let's just take a moment to pray quietly to ourselves. Take your hands and just hold them open, palms of the sky. Just put them in front of you. If you know you've been standing on the outside, I just encourage you to say, God, I invite you in. I invite you in. I'm going to try doing things your way. I'm going to try this from the inside now. And I ask the Spirit to birth himself inside of you. You can do that right now in your heart. The prophet Jeremiah talks about how his people had committed two sins. They had dug wrong cisterns, and they became leaky cisterns. They leaked the presence of God, and they lost track of what was true. If you've lost track of what is true, and you've attached 17 different mindsets or even one weighty mindset onto your soul, I ask you to continue to hold your hands open. Say, God, give me your Spirit. I want to share in the inheritance in the kingdom of light, and would you use that light to expose the mindsets that I might live the joyful, abundant, dynamic, struggle bus life that you've given me. I want to live it with fullness. Put your dynamite underneath all my hardness of heart. That I might live the full, whacked out, crazy, wonderful life of patience, endurance, peace, and gratitude and joy that you give me. I receive your Spirit. Continue to pour it out in my life. And we'll trust you with these things, Lord. Amen.